You know, we've done this in the past with other races, and it's always been everybody's favorite. So it's an opportunity for you to really get to know these people and probably say you were one of the first to get to know all these people.
All of you, I can trust the principles and the policies that motivate you, and how you'll vote is probably one that is in line with our country's founding. And so to this crowd, I'll give you a reminder. If you happen to not be registered as a Republican, you have until Tuesday to register as a Republican to make sure you can participate at caucus night and vote for our Republican presidential candidates during the presidential preference poll. So please do that. Now, if one of you happens to not agree with the Republican Party platform, go to your own party, and that's fine. We don't want you. The other thing I'll remind you, March 5th is caucus night. So these individuals here, as well as all of our candidates, they have an opportunity here in Utah to participate in the vetting process of being a candidate for office because of caucus. And so caucus is very important. So I would encourage all of you, March 5th, Super Tuesday, come on out to caucus, run to be a delegate, support somebody in your neighborhood who wants to be a delegate, and encourage that they are committed to working with these wonderful candidates to get to know them so that the state of Utah can have continued excellent representation. So with that, we're going to jump right into this. And a couple of things that I'll distinguish for everybody here. This is not a debate. This is a forum. So it's a little bit more friendly. And at some point, we will have debates where the boxing gloves can come out and the strict time with maybe the slime or whatever we throw at them if they go over the time. Today is not that day. Today is the forum. We want all of you to get to know these candidates. And so, like we've said, it's a very tight stage. This is the first time I've met Clark. So looking forward to meeting Clark after this and getting to know him better. But what we're going to do is let's just start here on the left, and we'll go clear to the right. And we're going to provide each of you 1 minute as an opportunity to introduce yourself. So I would encourage all of you guys to listen for websites, information so you can dive deeper and whatnot. So provide that information. But we'll start with that 1 minute opportunity to introduce yourself.
My name is Clark White, and this is super new to me. I am super embarrassed and super scared to be here right now. But I am super scared and super nervous to be here because I am putting myself forward to you guys, everyone, to be your candidate because I want better things for our country. I have seen where we're at, and I cannot stand it anymore, and that is why I am here. And my lovely wife, Brandy, is in the back there supporting me in all of this, and we have 2 boys who are with their cousins watching a movie right now, so.
Perfect, thank you, Clark. Gabriel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with such an elite company. I'm really happy to know that there is a future in our country. Well, for everybody, my name is Gabriel Owako. I am an immigrant. I was born in Venezuela and came here to the United States in 1980. And since then, I've been residing in the U.S. I've been a citizen for a very long while, and I've seen many changes with my time here in the United States. I've seen a deep decline in our customs, in our traditions, a deep decline in the economy, and to tell the truth, I feel that the future of our children is very delicate. It's in a very delicate balance right now. I don't agree with the direction the country is going, and that is why I decided to run. I got tired of pretty much waiting for somebody who would really help us steer the country in the right direction. And I am here running for the U.S. Senate.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you, Rob and Gail. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Brad Wilson, and it's an honor to be with you this afternoon. You know, I am fearful. I am fearful for the future of our country. And we have an opportunity as a state to make a big change in terms of how our state is represented and in terms of how the U.S. Senate shows up. And I've been traveling the state for many years as Speaker of the House and now as a candidate for the Senate. And you know what I've heard over and over again is, Brad, could you please go make Washington, D.C. look a lot more like Utah? And I think that's what this election is about. Who are we going to send back to Washington to represent our conservative values, to go back to Washington and fix what's broken and do the things that need to be done and send someone back there that gets results? And Rob, my experience in business and politics as Speaker of the House, I think uniquely qualifies me to do that. But we'll forum this tonight and start talking about the issues. So thanks for being here, everybody.
Okay, so I wanted to see if it was on. It is. Carolyn Phippen. So an experience that really informed my life and led me to the place where I am, I think, is my companion and I were sent as the first sisters into Czechoslovakia after the wall came down. And at that time, I had grown up prior to that, I like to say a Mormon in New York, where I was in this unique situation of having different values and thoughts and ideas than a lot of the other people around me. I came out to Utah to attend BYU and study government, and then ventured out, studied government when we still had a communist system functioning in the Soviet republics. From there, I went to serve in one of those former Soviet republics as a missionary. And I spent a lot of time asking people questions when I saw the devastation of that country that had been a free and prosperous nation 40 years prior. And what was it that led this country to a place where they no longer were free and prosperous? And what then brought them back out of it, and what made the change in their society? I think that we are seeing changes in ours that are extremely concerning. I'm going to say one thing. I think Rob just looked at me, so my minute's probably up or close. I'm a mother of 5 boys. I can talk as long as I need to. I'm just kidding. But I will say, I saw relatively quickly some changes taking place as freedom entered that country. And we are not talking about centralized economies versus free market economies. And we are seeing more and more our economic system becoming centralized, our values changing to those that government is giving us rather than what we are teaching in our homes to our own children. And there are things that government can and should be doing to start to turn the tide, but it really is us. Okay, I know that look, Rob.
Thank you.
So let me just say, carolyn4senate.com.
My name is Josh Randall, electsjoshrandall.com. If you saw the sign in the hallway, it says faith, family, and fiscal discipline, and I think we've got some challenges in Washington, D.C. on all 3 of those fronts, and that's really the primary motivation I have for entering the race. I'm a CPA and the father of 6, all under the age of 10, and pretty concerned to make sure that we have a good future for them. I want to eliminate programs at the federal level, privatize, and send back to the states. We've heard a lot today about federalism and the role the federal government has taken, kind of oversteps its bounds. No question, we need to send some things back to the states. I consider myself frugal. We live it. I would vote a little different than some of the people on this stage. I've got a little bit different views maybe on the debt ceiling, a little bit different views on some other social issues. And I hope we will delve into the things that will help you to see the differences between us as candidates. But I am convinced that do not shelf your faith. Whatever you do when you vote, don't shelf your faith. I can think of nothing we need as a people more than to live our religions and then take our faith with us when we go into the public arena. And that is one thing I'd like to push, probably more than anything of our campaign, is to help people feel empowered to do that. That's how the founders lived, with faith in God, and it's absolutely crucial for us to have that same faith to produce the miracles we need to make the changes we need. So thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Hi, Trent Staggs, lifelong Utah, elementary school to graduate school. Attended Utah schools, raised my family here. My wife and I have been blessed with 2 great children. And for the past 10 years, served my community in Riverton, 4 on the council, 6 as mayor. And also extensive business experience, helped take a company public, listed on NASDAQ in 22 in the energy space. You know, what this election is all about is being able to replace that guy, Mitt Romney, right, with somebody who's actually going to go back to D.C. and not become part of the establishment, but to fight up and stand up against it. That's what I've done for 10 years, folks. Go to trentstaggs.com to learn more. But it's typified my career, whether it's been saying no to mask mandates and vaccine mandates, whether it's been standing up for our children with inappropriate materials in school, fighting back against that, fighting against high-density housing, fighting up against ESG. And I'm the only one in this race that's taken on Mitt Romney. I was willing to go ahead and put my name out there, whether he was running or not. We were in this race because we can't deal with the status quo anymore, folks. We have to be able to push back against it, and that's what I intend to do.
Thank you, Trent.
Well, good evening. My name is John Curtis. Many of you know me. You may not know, though, before I got into politics, my business was actually building and designing shooting ranges around the world. And after I did that, I ran and was successful as the mayor of Provo. I'll just tell you one thing about that experience. We cut the budget. Taxes were lower when I left 8 years later than they were when I started as the mayor of Provo. For the last 6 years, it's been my opportunity to serve the 3rd Congressional District. And some of you are here in the room today, and I would hope, if asked, that you would hear 2 things from those that have served for the last 6 years. One, I show up. I've done more town halls than the rest of the delegation combined. I may have done more town halls than the rest of Congress combined, than hundreds of town halls. My office was just rated the #1 office for accessibility and accountability. Number 2, not only do I show up, for those that I serve, we get results. In the last 6 years, we've passed 19 bills all the way into law. These are bills dealing with very difficult issues in my district, such as public lands. You know how difficult public lands issues are. We passed one of the largest public land bills in the state's history, opioids, trafficking, small business regulations. And so not only do we show up, we actually get things done, and I look forward to earning your vote. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Thank you, candidates. As you noticed, I gave them a little bit of leeway on their time. We're going to have to be a little bit more debate style, I guess, when it comes to the question times. But on this, we're going to jump right into getting to know a little bit more about what motivates you. And so what I would love to know, and we're going to start with Carolyn, and on this would be a 30-second question. This room, again, is filled with, we'll see if she can keep to 30 seconds. This room is filled with people who put countless hours into fighting for what they believe in. How can they trust you, and what have you done, and how can you demonstrate the trust that they could warrant giving you?
Yeah. Okay. I have spent the last decade working with leaders in this state who are strong conservative leaders, and consistently, including Mike Lee, including Greg Hughes when he was Speaker of the House and the House Majority, I have consistently and tirelessly worked to pass good, strong conservative legislation against oftentimes other governmental entities and individuals who would like to put something forward other than what is good, strong conservative legislation. Anybody who's worked with me on the Hill absolutely knows that to be the case, and I've spent a lot of time outside of my work doing that as well. I could list off a bunch of things, but my 30 seconds are done.
Perfect. Thank you, Carolyn. And just for everybody's awareness, the question order is arbitrary. It's based off of when they RSVP'd to this event. So that's the order at which we are asking the questions. So I just want you to know that. So the next one, Trent, we're going to be going to you for this. This too would be a 30-second question. Please share with everyone here some of the stories and experiences that make you tick, and that will formulate how you will represent them should you be elected to the United States Senate.
Well, I think it's all about standing up against the establishment again, finding out, rooting out corruption, and doing what's right. And I've done that time and time again as the mayor of Riverton and serving my community for 10 years. This is not new to me. Our city council, I helped author a resolution in 2019 in support of human life. And we asked our federal delegation to go ahead and overturn Roe v. Wade. And I've done that there. I stood up again to mask mandates and to vaccine mandates. I ended up saying no to ESG. We've fought consistently against inappropriate materials in school. That really ticks me off. My children are one of my biggest motivators. And I've got a 14-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter. And it is really the height of immorality, I've said, for this federal government to have placed $34 trillion on their heads and on successive generations. And that's one of my biggest motivators, is to go out there, fight for them. And that's what I want people to know, is that I will get in there and absolutely fight for them.
Thank you, Trent. Representative Curtis, we'll go to you next. Tell us what it means to be a Utahn and how being a Utahn in the United States Senate is important for the benefit of our country's future.
Well, first of all, I want you to know I brag about Utah all the time back there. And clearly, if we could just do more things like Utah, we would be in a lot better shape. But I'll tell you the one thing that you may not see, and that is that I hear consistently that Utah swings above its weight. And if you look just at our House delegation, you'll see Burgess Owens, Celeste, and Chris Stewart formerly, and Blake Moore and myself. And I'll tell you what, we all work together to get synergy. We get more done than individually that we can. And to me, that's what it means to be a Utah. If you look at every facet of the way that we work together, we figure out, even though we have differences, how to move the ball forward for Utah. And I'm really proud to be part of that delegation that does that in a magnificent way.
Thank you. Next one, Brad Wilson. In those quiet moments when you've spent your day or week and you have that moment to reflect, what is it on your mind that most motivates you and encourages you to run for office for our state and your family's future?
Thanks, Rob. Well, there's been a lot of quiet moments as I've served in public office over the last decade or so. And the truth is, I remember when I got elected to the legislature as a brand new freshman, one of the things that I was very, very clear on is when I showed up there, I needed to do everything I could to make sure government didn't get bigger, and that we did everything we could to keep Utah the great place that it was, and keep it a red state, a conservative state. And truthfully, if you look back at all the success that this state has had, it's because we as a state have adhered to these conservative principles that we've been founded on. We're still a state that believes in personal responsibility. We believe in strong families. We believe in low taxes and small government. And those are the recipe for success. That's why, as a state, we feel like in this state we have more liberty than I think a lot of other places do. And that, to me, when I think about the work that we do, matters a lot. And that's one of the things that I reflect on. Quiet nights at the Capitol after the session, and even at home.
Thank you. Next, Josh. This question is for you, Josh Randall. What is the biggest motivator for you in your role as a parent, and how do you see being a member of Congress representing that?
Well, I want my kids to be happy. And I guess in the Congress, it's a similar type of concept. I want to defend everybody's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness and your property. And that's how I view my role as a federal senator, elected official. Primarily, my role is to defend, to provide the defense for you of your pursuit of happiness, life, and liberty, as opposed to providing the general welfare, but to promote the general welfare, but not to provide it for everybody. So I guess that's my answer.
Thank you, Josh. Moving forward, there was a request. Some people are having trouble seeing you, so when you're answering your question, if you'd make sure to stand up. So the next one, we're going to be going to you, Gabriel. So the question for you, what is it about the specific candidacy of the United States Senate that interested you, and how are you uniquely positioned to be prepared to be a United States Senator?
As I mentioned before, I'm not a Utahn. I was not born in this country. But because of that, and because I have lived pretty much throughout the United States, I've been able to appreciate other states and other countries. And I know that this is the best country and the best state of all of them. My goal is to keep it the same. When I moved into Utah, the town where I live, Sandy, was voted among the 10 best places to live in safety. Now that's not the case. It's not even in the list. And I worry because I see the same thing going around for all of us. All of our issues about safety, economy, children. I have 3 children myself. And I already left one country behind. And I am not going to leave this one behind either.
Thank you. Clark, you're going to round out this introduction round. The question for you is, should you be fortunate enough to win the election and be our next United States Senator, what is the first issue and the first priority that you will take to Washington, D.C.?
I would have to say that stopping our government spending and overreach, it's outrageous, and I am beyond words of how angry I am with what we have done to our country. And we have to stand up. We have to step up against this woke culture that's happening. I am beyond livid, and that's the reason why I'm here. I want to see us succeed. I want our economic to come back home. We need to be back in the United States. I am so proud when I see something that's made in the United States. I am not like any of these other people up here. I am blue collar. I work 2 full-time jobs. I raise a family. And I am tired of this. It needs to change. It needs to come back to us.
Perfect, thank you. This next question that we're going to be diving into, it will be the same question for all of you, and you will have 1 minute to answer this. This is an experiment on being very brief in your remarks, because I'm sure you can go at length on a number of these topics. But I know today, whether it's Speaker Schultz or others, they've talked a lot about the importance of federalism. So I would like each of you to take a minute to discuss what that means to you and how you will apply the principles of federalism to the benefit of the people of Utah. And we're going to go in the reverse order. So right back to you, Clark.
As I said, I am not good at this. And we need to bring the federalism. I won't lie to you. I need to circle back and say, I don't know. But what I need to do is give the rights back to us. I am tired of seeing it go away from us. It needs to go back to the individual. That is the most oppressed person.
Perfect. Thank you. Gabriel.
I do believe that the law should apply equally to everybody. But that does not mean that only the federal government should have or be the one to dictate what the law is. Every state has their own customs, their own type of people, their own habits, and Utah is special in that respect. We're very conservative, and I am so happy that we are. And we need to be able to protect that. So although I do agree that we need to have a level of federal intervention telling us what to do, we still need to be able to limit the federal government into what they can do with our state. These things about the national asset companies is really crazy. The environmental craziness that is going on is really messing up and taking advantage the lack of knowledge that some of us may have. But there's a lot of lying at the federal level. And I'm hoping that I will be able to deter a lot of that.
Thank you. Josh.
There are various industries that the federal government has gotten involved with that they shouldn't have gotten involved with. Healthcare, education, I mean, the list could go on, and I'd like to eliminate those agencies and eliminate the federal government's hand in those. I trust the state of Utah. I'd like to see the state of Utah manage more of the land here, as opposed to the BLM and the federal government. Part of that might be because I work for the Trust Lands Administration as an audit manager, and I also work with the BLM a little bit, and I see us moving a lot faster. The state government moves faster. The Trust Lands Administration moves faster, and I trust the people of Utah. We have great values. We understand what it takes to get a good education. I've heard Trent say this, and I agree with him. We don't really need the Department of Education on the federal level. And so those are just a few of the things that I would do, and I hate to steal anybody else's answers, but that's a few of the things that I would do.
Thank you, Josh. Brad.
Thanks, Rob. You know, the 10th Amendment is very, very clear on what should and shouldn't be managed by the federal government. And what's happened in this country over the last half a century is very, very far away from what we should be doing and what the 10th Amendment says we should be operating this country like. And it's important, I think, for all of us to recognize that. And whether it is federal lands issues, whether it's taxation, whether it's commerce, there's so many things that could be managed better if they were managed at a state level. I've had a front row seat to how important it is that state leaders work closely with our federal delegation to make sure that people stay in their lane. And, you know, a good example of what's happening right now is the Biden administration has not been able to pass its agenda on energy through Congress. And so by fiat, by executive order, by rule, they're shutting down or trying to shut down energy production in this state. We actually took the fight and filed a lawsuit against the federal government and against the EPA to tell them to stay in their lane. And we've succeeded in that way. But that's a good example. We've got to have people that are going to go back to Washington and fight to keep the federal government in the place and in the lane that it belongs and out of states' rights and out of the state's ability to manage the vast majority of what states should be doing and what government should be doing.
Thank you. John.
These are all great answers, but I would like to point out the principle here, and the principle is that those closest to the problem make the best decisions. And that doesn't matter if it's the federal government, the state government, county government. I'm going to tell you as a mayor, and I bet Trent would agree with me, we get tired of the state telling us how to run our cities, right? And so this principle, if it's good for the state, it's also good for cities. And I would just advocate that at every level of government, we make our best decisions the closer we are to the people who are impacted by those decisions.
Thank you. Trent.
Well, you hear a lot of people talk about being conservative. I think I like to say I'm more than a conservative because I'm a federalist. And the concept of federalism is the beauty of the founding of this country, the founders that it actually create our Constitution. I mean, it's in Article 1, Section 8, where it clearly delineates the roles and responsibilities of the federal government. And those that aren't there, that aren't articulated there, should be left to the states or to the people, as it says in the 10th Amendment. Now, what have we seen? What have we seen over the last especially the last 50, 60, 70 years? We've seen a federal government become so large and grow and do so much more than our founders ever envisioned that they're failing to do what's in Article 1, Section 8. I mean, immigration is case in point. We're seeing that, a complete failure right now with the Biden administration of this border. And so what would I do? Well, as a mayor, and John just talked about it, for 10 years, I've been on the front lines, I like to say, of fighting back on governmental overreach. And that has been at the federal, the state, and even the county level. And I've done it time and time again, whether it's getting out of county-wide services, self-providing law enforcement for our community, coming up with much greater solutions locally. Those that are closest to the problem, local governance is what governs best. And having that perspective for the last 10 years, taking that back to DC, I think lends a very unique perspective and why I'm very well qualified to represent all of you in the U.S. Senate.
Thank you. Carolyn.
So I serve as the Federalism Impact Chair on the Salt Lake County GOP, as well as having worked on issues of federalism repeatedly with Utah Citizens for the Constitution, which I'm a board member of. And we see it all around us. And I will tell you, the biggest driver of this violation of the principles of federalism, and it has been mentioned, that it is very well delineated and spelled out what the responsibility and role of the federal government is. And I always say, when government fails, or when government does those things that are not its most fundamental duty, it always fails to do those things that are its most fundamental duty. And thank you. When I talk to elected officials about this, the answer that I often get is, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Yeah, but you've never done it. So, and we don't even have to go there because we have a constitution. And this is all driven by money. It is when states and communities take money from the federal government. I'm also working with some people to try to untangle where the federal funding is entering our education system, because that is infecting everything and creating a lot of the education problems that we're having. I'll stop it there.
Perfect. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, candidates, for your answers. And to all of you, I just to get more questions, I've kind of cut off the applause, but in between rounds we can do applause, and at the end we'll do a lot, but I didn't mean to cut off the enthusiasm. You've all had enthusiasm. I do want to mention that Congressman Curtis had a long-standing commitment. And so I don't know when you need to leave, but we're going to let him do his closing statement prior to leaving. But if you have time for one more question. Perfect. Well, next, I'm actually going to invite up Chris Ullman, who's the president of Eagle Forum National, for a couple of questions. And so we'll do the first question, and you'll be able to participate in that, and then we'll have your closing statements. Okay, Chris.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to start with a really easy one. Having been a former Senate staffer and having a deep love for the United States Senate and the way that it operates, I feel that right now, we actually have no Republican leadership in the Senate. We do not have a minority leader. We do not have any voice in the United States Senate. If you were elected and you could choose any Republican in the Senate to be hopefully the majority leader, but the Republican leader of the Senate, who would you vote for Republican leader of the Senate if it were your choice the day that in January? And we'll start with you, Representative.
Yeah, I'm going to steal the answer before everybody else says it. Mike Lee, right?
Yeah, just go down the line.
Yeah, I think Mike is fantastic, and there is a core group of conservatives that I want to be able to get back there and caucus with. Carrie Lake, we got a great cast of people too that are running right now that have also endorsed my candidacy, and Carrie Lake is one. I'm looking so forward to getting in there and being able to move the ball finally.
Well, short answer, I think Mike Lee would be a good candidate for it. I like Ray Lankford out of Oklahoma as well. I think we've got a couple that are very good candidates for it. Rand Paul is very good fiscally, so those are three that come to mind for me.
Can I say anything other than my former boss and mentor in the Senate? Mike Lee.
I think your question's a really good question, and I'm going to jump on the Mike Lee bandwagon. He's the person that I know the most and trust and enjoy working with and have for years. But I think the question is, when that election occurs and when the person that we elect to the U.S. Senate is making that decision, from my perspective, we don't know what the cast is going to look like, what the slate is going to look like. But the paradigm that I'm going to use is, who is the candidate that's running for majority leader, not minority leader, that is going to advance a conservative agenda in the strongest way possible? And that's the filter that I will use.
Excellent. Go ahead.
My first choice for that position would be definitely Mike Lee. But I do have an alternate. We have a couple of other nice senators in the Senate right now that are making the fight. And those are Ted Cruz and Senator Kennedy. Definitely, they do make a lot of effort to make things the right way.
I would have to say Mike Lee as well, because he's from Utah. He's on our team, and that's what we're trying to fight for, is the conservative aspect and giving it back to us.
All righty, I should have taken Mike off the list. Let me ask you another quick question, and that is, Right now, we're looking at funding. Oh, do you need to run? Okay,
Yeah, and I'm so sorry. I wouldn't do this for anybody but our military, our National Guard. I committed to them months and months ago that I'd be there at 5 o'clock. So if you'll excuse me, let me just make a quick statement and then I'll go. Listen, there's something interesting in my political life, and that is that the more people know me, the more they support me. So I would just simply make all of you a challenge. People come up to me all the time and say, gosh, John, I didn't know your voting record was so conservative. I just took everybody else's word. And so to this group, I would just make you a challenge. Get to know me. Come hear me and see me. And there is a phenomenon that happens every time. The more time you spend with me, the more time you like me. Thank you. It's good to be with you tonight.
Right now, the United States Senate and the House are considering international funding bills for Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and others. Let me just ask each one of you the same question. In order to get your vote to support international aid for our allies overseas, is there anything that would have to be in that bill to get your support? Are there any conditions that you would put in an international funding bill? I'll start with Carol. Yeah.
Okay. For me, I would think, first of all, I can't have a bill that includes all international funding. It would need to be broken down. I have massive concerns because of the fact that we are having trouble. We are sending so much weaponry overseas to Ukraine and have been, that we are at risk of being able to defend ourselves. And there are massive threats from China with regard to Taiwan. So I don't know the intelligence on that. So I can't say what's happening behind the scenes. What I can say is we've made some big mistakes, not only with funding, but with getting rid of and sending away our weaponry. I know with some systems, we're 7 years out just to replenish our own stock and defend our own selves. So, you know, additional conditions, I can't answer that question. What I can say is break it down, give me a good reason, tell me what we're sending. I think we have to secure the home front because we have completely failed at that, especially with the 25% shortfall in recruiting in our own military because our focus seems to be on everything except for securing our own nation. So.
I guess I have to call on people. Okay, Trent.
Well, I think that Mike Lee had it right in the last National Defense Authorization Act to go ahead and no on that because of FISA 702. I mean, this was absolutely ridiculous. We've had examples of over 200,000 cases of warrantless spying on Americans, and the fact that that was included in that National Defense Authorization Act is absolutely obscene. I would have followed his lead, voted no on that. With respect to funding of Ukraine, I have been on the record repeatedly. I'm not in support of that. I'm not in support of endless war. We cannot continue funding these other nations when we don't even have a secure border. That's been what I've said time and time again. The state of Israel, I do find a bit of an exception there because we do have a 10-year commitment to them. It's about $3 billion worth. We do a phenomenal amount of trade with them that almost bridges that. And I really am one that is going to stand up for Israel and make sure that we continue that commitment there, especially with their Iron Dome. People don't really understand. I've talked to so many in the Jewish community. They have 1,700 missiles thrown at them every year, and it's unbelievable that they're a sliver of freedom in the Middle East, and we need to have them continue to be there.
Excellent. Okay. John.
Well, I think the free world looks at us as a leader, and we have been given much. And it would be great to be our brother's keeper and be able to help as much as we can. It's very difficult for us to lift other nations if we're not on solid ground ourselves. And sometimes it's kind of a paradox to be borrowing money from an adversary so we can go pay for a different war. Borrow money from China so we can go give it to Ukraine. And I think that in addition to that, you know, I don't know how much I always trust necessarily just writing a check and saying to President Zelensky, go use Americans' taxpayer dollars the best way you see fit. So it's kind of it's almost sacred funds to me to say, this is Americans' taxpayer dollars. We want to help where we can, but if we don't have the money, we've got to fortify ourselves first. That's kind of the overarching principles that I guess I would go by, is that we need to have oversight of how that money is spent. We can't just give them a check and say, go do good things with it. We need to have Americans trusted with overseeing how American dollars are spent, even overseas.
Thank you. Gabriel?
I know that there is at least 7 people filing for bankruptcy every day in the state of Utah. And the reason for that is because we all run over our capability to make money. We see our debt increasing recently to $34 trillion, now has to pay close to $1 trillion in interest, which could be used easily to fund Social Security and Medicare and many other programs that are much needed. So I would not agree with any funding, especially if there is no auditing, because how is that money being used? How do we know that nobody is dipping their sweet fingers into that money and using it personally? So for me, that is an important value. First of all, strengthen ourselves, get rid as much as we can, or at least learn to manage that debt, because if we don't manage it, it's going to keep growing. And ultimately, at some point, the United States will go bankrupt. And if it does, who will benefit from it? It's not going to be any of us. So first, strengthen ourselves. Let's put back ourselves in a position that we can actually help others, and then continue help.
Thank you. Clark?
When it comes to funding other wars, we should not be involved one iota. We are not involved in this. Those are their borders to protect, not ours. We need to protect our borders. We need to bring it back to the United States and stop all of this corruption. The guns and things we're sending to these other countries, when was the last time they got their background check? I can't trust any of them.
All right, thank you. And Brad?
You know, Chris, this is a great question, but it's also a sad question, because I actually believe if we had stronger leadership in Washington, and in particular the White House, none of these things would have happened to the degree that they have. Biden's weak leadership has caused hot spots all over the country, all over the world, to flare up. And if we're going to fund and support these different issues, I actually am very supportive of helping Israel wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. But even there, like these other instances that you described, the American people deserve and should require that a strategy is articulated, that there's accountability from our elected officials on what this money is being used for, and there's transparency in terms of how this money is being spent. And Carolyn's right, these should not be lumped into one bill of any kind. They should be talked about and debated separately, and all of them should be contingent on securing our border.
Well, as the president of Eagle Forum, I have to ask one final question, and I'll just ask you to raise your hand. This past session of Congress, Senator Durbin tried to revive the Equal Rights Amendment by offering a bill that will strip out the time limit and deem the Equal Rights Amendment ratified. If you're elected to the United States Senate, will you vote against any effort to revive the Equal Rights Amendment? Raise your hand if you will vote against any effort to revive the ERA. Against bringing it back to life. All right. Thank you very much. I will turn it back.
Thank you, Chris. And for Chris's benefit, do you have one of those? Or actually, I've got one right here.
Yes.
Just so you're aware, she's going to make sure that each of you as candidates receive her survey and her questionnaire. And I'm sure the folks in this room would love to see those answered and returned. There you go.
I have one after the debate for every one of you. It's our Eagle Forum 2024 congressional candidate questionnaire. If you would fill it out and send it back, then we can start the ball rolling. But we also never endorse a candidate that we don't have the approval of our state leaders. So you have to get the approval of the Gale and Eagle Forum of Utah before we can endorse.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Very much appreciate all you do on the national level. Gail, quick question for you. We started a little bit late. Do we have time for 2 more questions or just 1 more question?
We have time because we were late.
Okay.
As long as they want to stay, we can.
You guys good for 2 more questions before your closing statement? Okay, perfect.
I think go to that point, and if anybody wants to stay, we can stay.
Okay, perfect. That sounds good. I'll defer to Gail. So the first question that I want to ask, we got into this a little bit in the course of the last answer, but the southern border right now is a disaster, and we've all seen that, and it's been a disaster for quite a while. I'm sure many of you have been to the southern border and seen some of that. I actually went with Senator Baldry earlier this spring and last year, spring, and got to see what's happening there on the southern border. So that's an issue that I want to have the context of in your mind. And then look, recently here in our country, everything is becoming polarized. It's all tribalized. And so you look, the issue on the border, it's either you're for protecting the border or you're not, if you're talking from a Republican point of view. If you're talking from a Democrat point of view, you're against people and the humanitarian response of people who are fleeing violence, or you're not. So what prepares you as a candidate to help break that divide, to actually get progress on the issue of our southern border, while still recognizing those tribal answers that have left us at an impasse? And for this, I'm going to actually just kind of go round robin. We're going to start with you, Gabriel.
I actually believe that I am especially able to answer that question. We do need a secure border. I have talked to many Hispanic people and many people that have come here from other countries, and there is one agreement that we all have. 95% would go back to their countries if the conditions of their countries would improve. And it's not that it would take 10 years or 15 years. They will probably go back next week if the conditions in their countries improve. So I would definitely support securing the border, and I would definitely support helping other countries in the continent to improve their viability in the continent, because the United States completely lost control of that.
Perfect. Thank you, Gabriel. Trent, let's go to you.
Well, I think this is an area where we have sadly compromised ourselves into a very, very bad situation. And I, for one, we have to have that border secure. I mean, just without a doubt. We had it under President Trump. I agree with the comment earlier that if we had President Trump back in the White House, we wouldn't have these foreign wars. We wouldn't have the crisis we have at the border. I mean, I met specifically with the ICE director of Salt Lake City that encompasses Montana, Utah, Idaho, Nevada. And he detailed the issues that we have. I mean, some 7-8 million people that have come into this country illegally now. That's a good 2-3 times the size of our state, if you can believe that. Just to put it into context. I'm witnessing it in my own community. I think every state is now a border state, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. It's not rocket science. We should be able to get an agreement on this. Build the wall, remain in Mexico, E-verify. If we did those things, we would be in much, much better shape. You know, I think, sadly, we've had some things happen here in our own state where we've kind of gutted the E-verify provision. There are things that we can do not to magnetize people to the extent that we have. The humane thing to do, you've talked about the humanitarian crisis, and it is absolutely that. The humane thing to do is to have an orderly process for immigration. To have a border wall, but to have an open door. And I've talked to many folks that have taken 12, 13 years to attain citizenship. That is far too long. If somebody wants to come to this country and pledge allegiance to that flag, I want to help them do that. But they have to abide by our laws and our rules. And my experience And dealing with immigration now and speaking with so many people in the federal government level, I think prepare me exclusively for that.
Perfect. Thank you. Carolyn.
So I was down at the border. You failed to mention. I was on
You
that
were
trip.
there. You were.
As was Senator John Johnson. But yeah, I will tell you, and I was talking to, not only from that trip and that experience, but I was talking to federal agents here in Salt Lake a couple months ago, or in December, and they said that we have federal agents making $110,000 a year being paid to make sandwiches down at the border. And they are being taken from all over the country. And when we were there, we were told by the border security at the time that 90% of the work that they're doing at the border is humanitarian. We have women and children being trafficked, and it is completely being incentivized by the Biden administration. So our nation is responsible for what's going on. I will tell you, the way that we bring more people to the table on this, and I will say the work that I've done politically has uniquely qualified me to do this because it's what I've done in my job, and that is figure out how we make the case to people who may not always think like we do. I'm a facts and figures person. Give me the information, give me the data, give me the facts. Not everybody is, and I understand that. When we talk about the trafficking that's taking place there, and we can talk about the economic impact, and I could go on about that because the House just put out a report, by the way, that said I had seen $451 billion a year, $500 billion, that it will cost us. And then somebody told me that they just saw something yesterday that it was $570 trillion a year in estimated costs to just take care of these illegal aliens who are coming across our border right now. This at a time with our $34 trillion deficit, and by the way, the biggest driver of that $2 trillion deficit, or $34 trillion debt, excuse me, the biggest driver of that $2 trillion deficit this year, do you know what it was? It was reduced income tax payments from the American people. 2022 to 2023, we saw a just over $450 billion, almost equivalent to the then half trillion that we'll be spending on illegal aliens. That's an additional trillion in coming years, minimally. Not even accounting for the issues that we're going to have with increasing levels of, of interest in order to continue paying for this ever-growing debt. So this is a significant problem. So when we make the case on an emotional level, because there are emotional impacts as well, we can bring more people to understanding why it's important. Yeah.
Thank you, Carolyn. Clark.
When it comes to border security, it is of utmost importance. I have a grandmother and family that are in Arizona, and they tell me constantly of they're having people literally hopping over their fence even, of people they don't know and trying to break in and steal stuff. And it's only a matter of time before it comes to us. But on that as well, I have so many immigrant friends that tell me how much greater our country is, but how hard it is to get into this country. And the thing we need to fix is our immigration policies on how they can get in, because we want those good people in here. We are the melting pot of the world. That's why we are different. It's why who we are, we are.
Perfect. Thank you, Clark. Brad.
When President Trump was in his second year in office, 200,000 people crossed the border illegally. This last year, 2.5+ million people crossed the border illegally. Things have changed, obviously not for the better. I'm going to disagree with Carolyn on just one little thing. They're not just making sandwiches down on the border. There's one other thing that's happening. In Texas, Texas built its own wall. And right now, the Biden administration has ordered federal employees, immigration officials and agents, to tear down Texas's wall. So this is not the way that we should have our federal government working and solving this issue. We have to secure the border. We have to tighten the border. Your question, though, Rob, wasn't about that. I think we all agree with that issue, right? Until we can secure the border and close it, we're not going to be able to fix our legal immigration problem. And these two things are obviously inextricably tied together. But what we have to have in Washington, someone that's going to go back and represent Utah, is someone that's going to be relentless and not compromise on issues that are important like this. We've got to make sure that whoever we elect there is going to play for the team that we elect them to play for. This is a red state. We're going to elect a Republican. The Republican we elect needs to go back and play on the team Republicans play on and solve these issues.
Thank you. Josh.
Well, it's been talked about a little bit already, the gotaways, 2.5 million gotaways. The tone at the top has to change, obviously. We need to get Mayorkas out. We really need to get Joe Biden out. We've had federal people in the White House administration. Part of the problem is they're simply not complying with the laws that are already on the books. And now it's gotten to a point where we probably need to send the military down to help out with the human trafficking and drug trafficking that's going on. And if the Border Patrol says we need to put a wall across the whole border, that's what we need to do. And this thing with Texas, absolutely crazy. Sanctuary cities. Boy, we need to clamp down on sanctuary cities. It's unbelievable to me that we have an administration that allows so many of our big metropolis areas to just shove it in the face of our federal agencies and say, hey, we don't care. We're not going to help you with the laws. We're going to go and fight against. We've got to defund if we need to. But I'd like to reach across the aisle with Democrats on this, but I lean Trump's position on it. I think our border was better before, and there's no question in my mind that it was, and we need to return to that.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're going to do it one quick round robin and then the final question, because I would love to talk a lot about the Constitution, but we don't have enough time today to go beyond one or two more questions. But I'm personally of the opinion that the Constitution creates an even playing field with a set standard of rules that when we adhere to that, that's where Republicans, Democrats, neighbor to neighbor, with whatever differences we have, we find commonality within that rule book. Unfortunately, as certain parties and individuals have left the Constitution in adherence or understanding of it, that's where we now don't know what we're playing. And an example I'll bring up, it's like having a cricket team and inviting them to play against a baseball team on a football field without any lines drawn. Who knows what sport we're playing? And so with that in mind, the round robin quick question I would ask from each of you is, what is the top one or two amendments or issues that are within the Constitution that you think we are missing the point of and that the American people need to recommit themselves to understanding that would improve our country's future? So the top one or two that you think need to be focused on, and we'll just start here and go to the end. So Clark.
Term limits. I'm tired of seeing these politicians that stay in there forever, and we need to bring it back.
Perfect. Gabriel.
I think that the first two that are the most important for me is first, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion. We need to be able to do that. For me, it's completely, I cannot understand how come we can be so respectful to Islamic religions and the Prophet Muhammad when we are not respectful about Jesus Christ. If it is one, it's for everybody. And as we are respectful to them, they should also be respectful to our beliefs.
Perfect. Thank you, Gabriel. Brad, we'll go to you.
Yeah. Three quick things. I would just say the 10th Amendment of federalism, we've talked about it. It is the way that the game should be called and should be played, but it's not. And until we get back to that, our country is going to, I think, continue to sputter and have challenges. The second thing, I was actually going to say religious freedom and religious liberty. We've been a leader on that in the state of Utah. And in fact, what we've done in the state of Utah has been used all over the country to protect religious liberty in other states. But the third thing I would add that should be added is a balanced budget amendment. Until we change the system in Washington and have a forced way to control spending, they're going to continue to print money. They're going to continue to create inflation. They're going to continue to pass this $35 trillion in debt to our children. Something has to change, and a balanced budget amendment is, I think, the solution.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Now, yeah. So I actually asked the question of Senator Steve Daines, Senator Eric Schmidt, and Senator Mike Lee yesterday. or the other day. I don't know, the days all blend together. I was at a lunch with him. And the question that I asked had to do with spending. And the point that you just made is exactly what that response was. And I'll tell you, Senator Daines said, there will not be the courage in Washington to limit spending until there is a balanced budget amendment. But I would say, here's another one of the things I say all the time. I have a number of them. Sorry, as a mother, this just happens. But that is that the Constitution was the negotiated middle for the founding of this nation. There is nothing extreme about the Constitution. And thank you. And this gets back to our messaging as conservatives. That has to be a part of what we share with people. This is the middle. And I'm going to talk about, just super briefly, the Constitution in its totality. And that is, we need to make sure that our children and our grandchildren, I'm still waiting for some, I bought chickens this summer because nobody's giving me any yet, but that our children and our grandchildren understand that what the Constitution is the document that limits the government's power against the people. So the only way the government can abuse us as individuals is if it defies those principles laid out in the Constitution. We need to understand this, we need to teach it, and we need to share it. It's understanding the totality of that document.
Perfect, thank you. Josh?
Can you repeat your question a little bit, Rob? What was the question again?
Yeah, just which one or two issues within the Constitution do you feel most need to be focused on to get us back to a place that will benefit our country?
Okay. And I liked some answers that already have been given. Brad's answer that we need a balanced bill amendment, balanced budget amendment, absolutely. We've got to get there. And I liked Gabrielle's answer as well. The first and second amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. I guess that's the first. But freedom of speech, freedom of religion. You know, I hear a lot of people say things to the effect of, I'm not going to legislate morality. I'm not going to legislate my morality. I've actually heard people say that in the last couple of days, some of which I'm concerned, one of which was on the stage with us tonight. And I thought to myself, that's an interesting take that you have. I'm not going to legislate morality. If you take that position to its finality, ultimately, the question becomes, are you going to legislate immorality then? One of the largest problems we have in this country was the misinterpretation of the freedom of religion. We've got moral decay. And I'll tell you, economically speaking as well, if we can fix moral decay in this country, it's going to help us everywhere else. We have got to vote. I've said this before, and I agree, and I'll say it, it's kind of part of my closing too, but we have to vote our faith. We have to vote values. We can't put our moral values on the shelf. And so I think that's a misinterpreted part of, you know, we're not supposed to have a church, one religion for our country, Church of England type style. I understand that. We have dozens of good religions though, and we all need to keep voting with our values.
Perfect, thank you. Trent?
I think to back up from the Constitution, we have to remember the context in which it was formed. And the Declaration of Independence, our birth certificate, it's what it said, that we have an inalienable right to life, liberty, and property. In the Eagle Forum, that's noted on their website, that's one of their principles, right? That governments were instituted to protect these God-given rights. And I think that's what people need to grasp. That's what they need to catch on to and understand. They don't get their rights from the, quote, generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. And that our Constitution was created to go ahead and limit government. That's first and foremost. This didn't used to be partisan. I mean, John F. Kennedy in his inaugural address, that's exactly what he said. And yet today, you're right. We're not playing by the same playbook, by the rules that were created by our founders, because we've had one party that's been completely deranged and hijacked. So that first and foremost. And I get back to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. If we know that our rights come from God, that governments were instituted to be able to put that, to protect those rights, then what are we giving government, federal government particularly, the right to do? It's delineated there in the Constitution, and if our citizens know that, are properly informed with that document, then they can push back too. because we need the elected officials to be there that have courage to push back against this establishment machine. But it's the residents, the citizens of our great nation, too. They're going to help support that.
Perfect. Thank you. Now let's give all of our candidates a good round of applause. We very much appreciate, and I will say, as the Republican Party chair, I am grateful for good men and women who are willing to put their name on the line as candidates for any office, but especially all of you here running for the Senate. Thank you for being willing to do it and doing it within our party. I'm grateful that we have a deep bench, getting back to that sports analogy. We know what sport we're playing, what game we're playing, and we have a deep bench of talented players. So thank you very much. We will do the final closing statements. Keep it to 30, 45 seconds. Maybe I'll give you 45 seconds because I've been very kind tonight. It's going to be abrupt next time we do an actual debate. But we're going to go in that reverse order again based off of how quickly you RSVP'd to Gail and her wonderful team. So Clark, we're going to start with you for your closing statements.
Well, I'll try to be short and sweet because I don't have a lot to say other than I want these rights that were given to us by our founding fathers back to us. Our life, liberty, happy, and pursuit of happiness.
Perfect. Thank you. Josh.
Well, I love Utah. I love our country. I am convinced we know how to do it here. We have great people here. We don't gamble. We don't drink a whole lot. We really emphasize education. Part of it is some of the theological things that we do in our state, and it's emphasized. We have kids. We love our kids. We put family first. We don't have a ton of abortion like other places. There's a lot of values that we have here that are different. I could go on. We've got to take those values to Washington. Now, I understand we can't go legislate all of these things at a national level, but gosh, I am convinced that we've got to hold on things pretty good here in the state of Utah. And my commitment as a senator is that I will represent those values and I won't compromise on core values. The core Utah values, they're on the social issues and also on our budget and living within our means. Boy, I'm very passionate about those things and I won't compromise on those. Please approach me and ask me, how are you going to vote? How would you have voted on the Respect for Marriage Act? How would you have voted on those debt ceiling bills? What would you have done? What will you do? And I will commit to you. I'll tell you all those details. I don't have time right now, but I don't compromise on those core values. We've got it right here in Utah. And it's a great nation, a great state we're part of. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Gabriel, we'll go to you.
I'm not a millionaire. I'm not a career politician. I'm just like you. I work. I have a career. I do go to the market with my wife shopping, and I don't like those prices at all now. I see the limitations that we're facing because I'm living it with you. I'm part of that. And my goal, if you guys do decide to elect me to the U.S. Senate, is to continue to make things the way that we have been doing it since 1830. Make life worthwhile and continue progressing. Somehow we got stuck in the past and we keep revisiting the past, and that does not allow us to evolve, move forward. And the road ahead of us is so great and beautiful. And that's what we need to start focusing on.
Thank you. Brad.
Thank you. So in June of this year, we're going to decide who the Republican nominee is to represent us on the ballot in November. And unless something crazy happens, they're the next U.S. Senator from Utah. When we do that, we're going to send someone back there to do the work of the state, to represent the values, the conservative values that we care so much about. Let me just give you some examples of, I think, why that matters and the results that you could expect from someone like me or me. While I was Speaker, serving with great colleagues, we passed a trigger law to protect life in one of the most pro-life policies in the country. and that's in place now. The courts, the activist courts are fighting it, but it's in place in Utah. Biggest tax cuts in the history of this state, passed while I was Speaker. We got constitutional carry to protect Second Amendment rights, first time in our state's history, while I was Speaker of the House. We took the fight to the federal government to keep your energy prices low, and to keep your energy on, and we won that fight. We fought to make sure that boys don't play in women's and girls' sports, and we won that fight. These are the kinds of things that you could expect me to do when I go back to Washington as the next U.S. Senator from Utah. Get results that are aligned with the values of this state.
Thank you. Trent.
Well, thank you to the Eagle Forum. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you to talk about this. It's very important, right? And that's how I have always characterized this race. We have got to be able to get somebody in this seat that is a demonstrated fighter, somebody who has proven they've got backbone. And I've done that for 10 years in elected office. I talked about that at the outset, and that is why I have earned the trust of so many. I've received the endorsements of Mark Levin, of Charlie Kirk, of Kerry Lake, of Harmeet Dillon, of Rick Grinnell, of Kash Patel. I've received the endorsements of great organizations like Moms for America that's here. I've received the endorsement of the Utah Fraternal Order of Police that represents about 5,000 law enforcement officers across the state. I will always support our law enforcement officers. And I have received the support of Veterans for Trump. I've received many other organizations and about 100 local elected officials, those in the state of Utah, mayors, city council members, county commissioners. And they have voiced support for me and for my candidacy because they know I'm going to go back to Utah and I'm going to fight every day for you. Please go to TrentStaggs.com and take a look. I focus on smaller government, safer families, and a stronger economy. Thank you so much.
Trent. Carolyn.
We have a growing problem in Washington, D.C. I think if it has not been recognizable to most of us a decade ago, it certainly is now. And if we want to continue having the same types of problems that have brought us to what I consider the brink, economically, socially, in every aspect of our nation, our economy, and our communities, then we ought to continue sending the same type of people to Washington. I think it's important. I say all the time, all of us will say the same things on the campaign trail, every single one of us. You, as the citizens, are responsible to ask the right questions. I grew up in an area where I will say my parents were born and raised in Utah, went back to New York for my father's education. He received a PhD at Cornell and was responsible for some really great innovative things that have done more for cleaning our air than all the politicians in the history of the world, by the way. It comes through innovation, private industry, and free markets. And so I was raised there in an area of New York and came to Utah 35 years ago for school, settled in Draper, which was founded by my third great-grandfather who was born in the same area of New York where I was. And we both chose to come here for a reason. It is thinking through these principles, studying these principles that undergird our entire nation, that have brought me to where I am politically and have brought me to where I am in my life. And for that reason, my understanding of the principles that have founded and formed this nation and that have brought us the greatest prosperity and liberty that the world has ever known for the longest period of time in the history of man, those principles are the things that I believe in, that I want to see continue for my children and my grandchildren someday. And that is why I can be trusted in Washington, D.C. It is not about the policy. It is not about the little things here and there. We can negotiate and talk about those things all day long when we stay consistent on the principles that have built this country.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you again, Eagle Forum, for all that you do. Candidates, thank you. Join me in a round of applause for all of our candidates.
Thank you.
Remember March 5th for caucus night, and legislators, all the best. Hopefully you guys are geared up for a long session. Thanks for all that you guys do as well.